North Carolina loses for the third straight Tuesday, and it's yet another example of a top 10 team losing on the road at an unranked opponent.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade. We're joined by our guy, Leaf Tulane, as we are every week. Leaf, great to have you as always, brother. We want to thank you for making our show your first listen or watch every single day. Don't forget that we are free and available everywhere you get podcasts. In particular, you everydayers, we are glad you're here. If you're not part of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community, come join us. The link is in the show notes, and it's free for you. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Leaf, we have had a rash this season of AP top 10 teams losing on the road at unranked opponents. Heading into Tuesday night's action, these teams were under 500, these top 10 teams on the road. We had 32 wins and 34 losses at that point. We had three such games on Tuesday night. We had North Carolina at Syracuse, Marquette at Butler, and Iowa State at Cincinnati. For a frame of reference, folks, prior to this season, the last two seasons, AP top 10 teams on the road at unranked opponents, 75% wins, and the year before that, 73% wins. And again, this year, it's down under 50%, a precipitous drop. So Andy and I yesterday on the show discussed that it was given three more games of this type on Tuesday night. It was almost a certainty that one of those would lose. And in fact, it turned out that happened. And that team was number 7, North Carolina, falling at Syracuse 86-79, while the other two teams took care of business. Leaf, let's start there up in upstate New York. What's going on with North Carolina that they can't win on a Tuesday?
Well, maybe they just hope to not play on a Tuesday in the tournament. I mean, at least they'll start on a Thursday or Friday. But
honestly, this is breaking news. There are no Tuesday games in the NCAA tournament, so the Tar Heels might be in good shape.
Exactly. The reality of the situation that has me a little concerned is what Armando Bacot said about people missing practices and being late. And I wonder if this just kind of carryover effect of whatever happened after the Duke game, where players you assume you band together after you beat your arch rival, the best rivalry in college basketball, and you do so in convincing fashion. You'd assume that things get better for you, that's a morale booster. Instead, it seems to have been a distraction, something that allowed people to slack off. And since then, North Carolina has rebounded and won one game, but the others just haven't looked like themselves. And I think Syracuse is a tricky opponent in the sense that if they get hot, they can score pretty well.
Right. Because that backcourt of Mintz and Starling is electric.
Yeah, and it's a good basketball environment. Like, you're going to lose games. It's just the way that they've strung these losses together after that. And then we hear the stuff about Armando Bacot saying, oh, well, people are late. And then you hear Tyler Hansbrough go, well, if you were late once, you weren't going to be late again because you weren't going to be on the team. And you're going to see, I think this is like that type of distraction that can really hurt a team going towards the tournament, because even if they're good, they just don't necessarily have that faith in one another. And the team doesn't respect the coach doesn't respect the team. I'm not saying that's perfectly what's happening, but these type of things happen in college basketball frequently, where there's ulterior motives and other stories that distract heading into the most important time of college basketball. And you see those teams lose earlier than their talent levels should indicate.
Yeah, and I hear that, but I do want to push back on it some. I think that those Armando Bacot comments were overblown and taken a little bit out of context for what actually was going on. But there is definitely some truth to, like, hey, we got to sit down and figure out if there is something and what's going on. The biggest factor for me lately has been North Carolina's defense. Leaf, in ACC play before this stretch of losing 3 out of 5, North Carolina was playing, this is basically from January 1 through January 29th at Bart Torvik, was ranked as the second most defensive efficient team in the nation. Since then, in this 3-game, the losing 3 out of 5, in that 5-game stretch, Carolina's defense is 129th at Torvik defensive efficiency. So that to me has been the critical drop off. Here's another thing that I've kind of identified in the hours since that game. is that in the last 4 games, RJ Davis is shooting 25% from 2 and over 40% from 3. In that same time frame, Armando Bacot, for the first time this season, has 4 straight double-doubles. Teams are defending RJ Davis differently and allowing Armando Bacot to get unglued a little bit more. And so far, that has been, pardon the pun, but an Achilles heel for the Tar Heels. I'm curious to see. They have a game this Saturday against Virginia Tech. Then they have a week off before going to Virginia and closing out the regular season with 5 more games. Can North Carolina get some of these defensive things figured out? And secondly, for me, can they find another chess piece of how to there's been a counter move to RJ Davis and what he's been doing. Can Coach Hubert Davis and his staff find a counter move to the counter move?
Yeah, that's a great observation. And I think Armando Bacot is the type of guy who shouldn't be your top option. He should be a tertiary scoring option and then a rebounder. And that's what the best success was, is that RJ Davis was the lead option, and then I would say it was Harrison Ingram.
That's right. I agree.
And so then Harrison Ingram, I think, with fewer touches is less dynamic. I think the other thing I would point out is you saw a quick counter was Elliot Cadeau is kind of becoming the dare shooter, and teams will sag off of him and they'll go under his pick and rolls. Sure. And I think that clogs things up and it allows for an easier time denying RJ Davis the basketball. And so the antidote has been, we'll give post feeds to Armando Bacot, because that's what you do. If they're going to play off of you, you play into the big guy and then they kick it out to you. And if you shoot it, then great, but he's not making you pay. And I think more and more teams are learning to live with the results from Elliot Cadeau. And initially Cadeau would set an off ball screen and free up Davis, but you can only do that.
Yep.
Yeah. You can only do that so often. And then Harrison Ingram was kind of a dare shooter at the start of the year and is no longer getting those dare shots. And that's made it harder to have sustainable offense from the options that aren't RJ Davis, when people's scouting reports are becoming more advanced and able to key in on some of those tendencies that North Carolina was living on in the half court. Of course, the open court Carolina is still very good in, but I agree. I think the defense allows for that open court, and now that there's more possessions in the half court, that becomes more amplified as something that Carolina has to improve.
Cadeau has knocked down 3 3-pointers in Carolina's last 2 games. If he can make that a consistent thing, it's going to reopen some of that for all the rest of the players. We'll see what happens. Leaf, the other 2 top 10 teams at unranked opponents. Number 4, Marquette, won 78-72 at Butler. A good win for Marquette, who's playing as one of the best teams in the country right now, especially against a Butler team that's looking to establish some bubble bona fides. And Iowa State wins 68-59 at Cincinnati. Both of those teams take care of business. Leaf, any big takeaways for you from either of those games? I mean, maybe we should talk Tyler Kolek, who's just on one right now.
I mean, I love Tyler Kolek. I actually thought both of those, the home team, were going to win. I thought Marquette had won 7 straight going into that game. And I wondered, okay, well, Butler is playing well. They're kind of a bubble team that if they get this win, they solidify it. It's at Hinkle. It's a tough place to play. And Tyler Kolek just wouldn't let that happen. Speaking of not letting something happen, going back to a few games ago or just one game prior, they were down 9 at half, and it could have been more against St. John's at Marquette. And then he ended up scoring 27, 22 of which were scored in the second half, and just propelled his team to a double-digit victory from trailing by 9 at half. So I think what he's doing is really making his All-American candidacy more legitimate. They're playing through he and Oso Ighodaro even more so than they had before, where it was kind of, they were trying to find an egalitarian effort between, is it Cam Jones's night? Is it going to be David Joplin tonight? I think it's like, hey, I'm a more of a scorer than I was earlier in the season. I'm going to assert myself. And I'm Tyler Kolek, the reigning Big East Player of the Year.
That's a good word. I think that role definition that you just hit on is going to be key for Shaka Smart's club down the stretch. So, Leaf, as things stand now, these top 10 teams on the road at unranked opponents have a 49.3 winning percentage going into Wednesday night's action. 34 wins, 35 losses. We do get 2 more of these games tonight. Number 1, UConn at DePaul. We know what's going to happen there. And number 8, Tennessee at Arkansas. Those games are both 9 Eastern, the UConn game on CBS Sports Network and the Tennessee game on ESPN2. Obviously, we've got lots of theories about why this is happening, and I think we could just leave it as a big umbrella statement for now, Leaf, and have a bigger conversation another time. But just to say, this is college basketball right now, with teams getting older, staying older, transfer portal. still having COVID eligibility, all of these things, all these factors contribute to what's going on there. Now, Leaf, it has been a rough go at Rupp Arena for Kentucky lately, and a rough go in every game lately for Wisconsin. But both those skids are over. We'll talk about it in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode is brought to you by Gametime. We are just about a month away from college basketball conference tournaments, and maybe you don't have tickets, but you expect your team to make a wild run and you don't want to miss out on that. So Gametime would be the perfect place to get last-minute tickets so that you don't miss out on all the excitement. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy your tickets for all the sports and music and comedy and theater events near you. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and Gametime's best price guarantee. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. I love this thing they have. It's called Zone Deals. You pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for you, and doing so gets you big-time savings. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime, where you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's $20 off your first purchase at Gametime with code LOCKEDON. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Leaf, Wisconsin, played on Tuesday night. They had a 4-game losing skid going on. Still ranked in the top 25 at number 20. They get a 62-54 win at home over Ohio State. Kentucky, which had lost 3 straight games at Rupp for the first time ever. Number 22 Kentucky wins at home over Ole Miss 75-63. Leaf, which of these teams, Kentucky or Wisconsin, do you believe more in has turned something of a leaf now, pun not intended there either, from what they did on Tuesday night?
Well, I think Kentucky needed the win more, but I have less faith about their long-term answers defensively.
Yeah.
I think Wisconsin is the type of team that can rebound pretty easily from this rough slide and say, well, look, all we have to do is get back to being a good defensive team that was rugged, they're tough, kind of the typical Wisconsin, and we have more offensive firepower than we have in years past. Like even the year with Johnny Davis, I think they were less likely to make a run than they are this year because they were only Johnny Davis. This year they have a couple players that can score the basketball. So I don't think their seeding is going to be as good because they obviously lost a few games and they probably won't go undefeated the rest of the way. But if they, finish with a good record the rest of the way, let's say that's 5 seed. That's a 5 seed Wisconsin, and that's fine. That's what you kind of want to be. And I think defensively they're good. I think offensively it's easier to find that rhythm than it is for Kentucky to reinvent themselves and defend, because defensively they have 2 bigs that are unplayable at this point. Like
which 2? Name it.
Zvonimir Ivisic he cannot play in the NCAA tournament. Like he's shooting 71% from 3, and he's unbelievably gifted, but he is the worst defender in the country probably. And then you have Bradshaw is somewhat playable, but if the player's bigger than him, then he's not, because he just gets buried in the post and gets fouls like no one's business. So Onyensu has to play along with Trey Mitchell, and Trey Mitchell hurt his shoulder. So I think there's more issues for Kentucky finding the right combination, and I have more faith in Calipari to find a combination that works, just because even if he doesn't find the best one, there's still plenty of good combinations to have when you're 10 deep with 5 stars. Like that's fine. They'll figure something out. But defensively, if they have to change their ball screen coverage, or they have to press, or do something entirely different, because on their ball screen defense, they might be the worst Power 5 team in the country. And I would argue that their guards, like Reed Shepherd's getting all this notoriety for being so good defensively. He's a great, like, pesky, intelligent. He gets his hands on basketballs at an alarming rate. His anticipation is phenomenal, but I don't think he's a point of attack defender. Dillingham's not a point of attack defender. Wagner's not a point of attack defender, and you don't play all 3 at the same time. And then Justin Edwards and Adu Thiero don't shoot the ball well, and that's what you've been living on all year, is assisted turnover and shooting through well from 3. So I think they need to find some combination of a few decent defenders and a few shooters. But the real issue is their defense is never going to. They've been in the 200s the last month in Ken Palm efficiency.
Yeah. Look, their Ken Palm efficiency did go up after the game, but from like the 120s to 104, they're still outside the top 100 at KenPom defensive efficiency as we record on Wednesday morning. Leaf, you talked about Rob Dillingham. It continues to befuddle me, right? Just played 4 minutes in the second half of the loss to Creighton. In this game, he played the 7th most minutes on the team. Ugana Onyenso, Trey Mitchell, Justin Edwards, Antonio Reeves, Adu Thiero, and Reed Shepherd all played more minutes in this game than did Rob Dillingham. I get, as you were saying, he's not a great defender. But at some point, your most skilled basketball player, your most skilled scorer, to me, needs to be out on the floor the vast majority of this game getting you buckets. And I just do not understand why Coach Cal does not play him more minutes than he does. Do you have a rational explanation for that? Because I sure can't come up with one.
I think it's that he holds the ball too long. Yes, he gets their assist because he holds the ball and then he drives and kicks and he's lightning fast. I agree with you, though. I mean, if you're going to say, oh, it's defense, well, there's plenty of terrible defenders on his team.
Thank you. Exactly.
So,
yes.
So you might as well just try to commit to outscoring the team.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something about him not passing enough for Coach Cal, and they're like, hey, we got a lot of people who can score, and there's just not enough like ball movement. And I could see that, but I feel like there's a better way than benching him. Maybe you play him off the ball a little bit. I think you got to commit to playing your best talents offensively. I would probably play Shepherd, Dillingham, Wagner, Edwards, Reeves. I'd commit to small ball, or maybe you go Thiero instead of Edwards. And I don't really care if my big's there, or you could just play. Mitchell's hurt, so I would have said him. I just want to clarify that. Or you could go to Onyenso and just play
Agreed.
4 out, 1 in. But I just think that you got to commit to something. And if you're going to commit to being better offensively, you might as well play small ball and run. That's kind of my theory.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's so wild, the dichotomy between the offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. And Shepherd played the most minutes for Kentucky on Tuesday night, 32, but he's still coming off the bench. And so there's got to be some reason there that Coach Cal is locked in on why I don't start Reed Shepherd. Typically, I know he's started a couple games because of some of the injuries, but both Shepherd and Dillingham, who have been your 2 most productive freshmen, are both coming off the bench. At some point, that is confusing and doesn't make sense to me. Leaf, you talked about the long-term prospects. You actually feel better about Wisconsin than Kentucky. Do you think there is a lineup or a way this group of Wildcats can come together that you would feel better about their prospects? If Trey Mitchell gets back healthy, maybe we get back to the early season lineups where Trey Mitchell, as you're saying, playing small ball with Mitchell as the 5 and just saying, look, I know we've got this trio of bigs, but they're essentially unplayable in order for us to function at the highest level we can.
I don't think I have that much confidence in the way that Kentucky wants to compete. Like, in terms of, Kentucky doesn't like these moral victories. They want to win championships. I think they can make the Sweet 16 still. Like, I think making the Elite 8 wouldn't baffle me, but I just wouldn't predict it. I think it does have to be some sort of lineup that's offensively oriented, and then you have someone like Edwards or Thiero develop as hey, this is our defensive Swiss Army that can hit an open shot occasionally, and then you play Reeves and Shepherd and probably Dillingham. I think he's better than Wagner, but if Dillingham's in the doghouse, you play Wagner, and then you go Mitchell at the 5 if he's healthy, and if Mitchell's not healthy, then you can go either really small ball with Edwards and Thiero, or you go with Onyenso, and I'm fine with that, and I really think it would work. And you limit your rotation a little bit. You play some energy with Burks, and if Thiero's off the bench, Thiero, and then you play a little bit of the one guard who's out of the lineup if there is one, and it's just a little bit more cohesive. Right now, I feel like there's a lot of guessing, and I think there's players that aren't happy with their roles, and it kind of shows.
Yep. It's a lot of talent on John Calipari's roster. That's a lot to figure out. Now, here's the thing for Kentucky. Next, they finally get away from Rupp, which has not been great. But the problem is they're going to Auburn on Saturday, so we will see what happens there. Right now, KenPom favors the Tigers by 9 points in that one. Leaf, BYU and UCF combined for 113 points in the second half on Tuesday night. And BYU attempted 46 free throws. My goodness, what on earth was happening in Provo on Tuesday night? We'll talk about that in just a second, right after I tell you that this episode's brought to you by our good friends at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. How about tonight? As I mentioned earlier, we've got 2 top 10 teams on the road at unranked opponents. What's going to happen? UConn favored by 24.5 at DePaul, and Tennessee by 8.5 at Arkansas. So if you want to get in on that action or any of the other things I talked about, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Leaf, there was a lot of other great action on Tuesday night to get to. Want to just give some quick primers for some other Wednesday night stuff. But my word, we have got to start this next conversation in Provo. BYU, number 19, wins at home 90-88 over Central Florida. And Leaf, if you look at the halftime score of this game, BYU was up 39-26. So, I'm sitting there expecting we might get like a finish in like 70 something to 60 something, maybe in the 60s. Maybe it gets up even to the low. I don't know. No, the final score of this game is 90-88. And sure, if it was 50-45 at halftime or something, yeah. But no, these two teams combined for 113 points in the second half, including 62 points from UCF. Wildness. BYU was up 9 with 60 seconds left. UCF makes a push, but BYU is able to hold off, winning 90-88. But Leaf, part of the reason for so many points was the free throw line and the number of fouls called. Listen to this. UCF, 14 of 26 from the free throw line. Not a great percentage, but they went quite a bit. That's a hefty number in a normal game. Until you realize that in this one, BYU was 40 of 46 at the free throw line. It's a great moment for me to remind us all that Miami scored just 38 points in the entire game against Virginia the other day. BYU got more than that at the free throw line in this one. 46 combined fouls. 3 different Cougars had double-digit free throw attempts. Leaf, what on earth was happening in your great state of Utah?
Well, the main thing that baffles me is BYU is a good scoring team. Like, they're efficient offensively. So them scoring a lot's not stunning.
That's not.
But they don't play super fast. UCF doesn't play super fast, nor are they very good offensively. So to score 62.5 is what's really baffling me, because they scored 58 last time the two played when they played in Central Florida. So they scored 4 more points in a half against BYU on the road than they did at home in an entire game against the exact same team. So that baffles me. BYU making the free throws doesn't shock me. That's like what they're very good at.
That's right.
They play through a big, like, I can see how it becomes a high scoring game. UCF may press, maybe they push up the pace and they score, but it's just a strange game considering BYU is not exactly like the most rim attacking team either. Like, that's how you get fouls. They're a perimeter oriented team that shoots a ton of threes. And if they're on, they score a lot of points, which is why I told you if I just looked at the score that it wouldn't have like stunned me in terms of BYU's score. But like you said, it's not usually in one half. BYU, slight change of thought here is BYU is starting to win these games in the Big 12 that we kind of thought they'd lose, or at least I surely did. Where if it's really close and they're physical teams, obviously against UCF, who's also new to the Big 12, I don't think it's as indicative, but they've won a lot of close games, and I know they'd be good at free throws, but I didn't think they'd be able to score in late minutes, and they're starting to get better at that. And I think it's interesting because they really tried to stay with continuity. They stay with the same team. They said last year we're probably going to be pretty bad. They didn't even make the tournament. They weren't even well seeded in the WCC. And now they're going to be just as high as a seed in the Big 12, which is everyone's complimenting, saying they're the best in the country, as they were last year in the WCC. So I think this is quite a coaching job for Mark Pope. And the Cougars are really executing it to a T with a lot of internal growth.
Man, wild game, wild result. Wanted to make sure to talk about it. Leaf, as I said, had several other things from Tuesday. I'm going to just rattle a couple of these off, and then we can take it where we want to. Texas A&M might have had the weirdest Saturday to Tuesday turnaround. Saturday, they obliterated Tennessee at home, 85-69, and then Tuesday, they go to Nashville and lose at Vandy, 74-73. Yikes. It was a weird final shot. Vandy wins at the buzzer. Looked like maybe a travel double, something, I don't know. But just Vandy's second SEC win, 7-17 on the season. Tough one for A&M as they're trying to establish themselves in the NCAA tournament conversation. Virginia also loses on Tuesday night after a great run that they had at home. Interestingly, Pitt wins at Virginia 74-63. And so two teams atop the ACC standings lose. Baylor knocks off Oklahoma 79-62 in the lone ranked on ranked matchup of the night. And then Creighton destroys Georgetown, only notable because a triple-double for Baylor Shireman. Interestingly, the first ever points, rebounds, assists triple-double in Baylor history, or in, Creighton history. I said Baylor because that's his name. Not the first triple-double, but the first one with points, rebounds, and assists. Leaf, out of those 4 games, what kind of jumps out at you?
Well, I think that Baylor is getting better, and they're beating
Shireman or the team?
Well, I've liked Shireman for a long time, so he's not doing anything surprising me right now. But I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears of Waco, Texas. I think this is a team that I don't think is that great, and I've said that on here. I've said that on Twitter. I've said that at one point they were a 3 seed in bracketology, and I said they're masquerading around as a 3 seed and probably were a 7. I think I was a little too harsh. I think they're probably a 4 or 5. I don't really buy their prospects because I think they do have a lot of guards. That's a good recipe, but I don't think they work very well together. But Eve Missy's really elevating their stock.
Yeah.
If you're going to say, well, how are they going to win? Well, defensively, they're a ton better now because Eve Missy gives them a true rim protector. And now you can be more aggressive on the perimeter, and they're better defensively than they were last year, where they were just good offensively, and you had to outscore teams. So I think in a weird way, this Baylor team's better than a Baylor team that had a really good backcourt of players that are either in the NBA or are potential All-Americans in LJ Cryer, Adam Flagler, and Keontae George.
Yep.
And so I think this Baylor team's getting better, and they showed kind of a touch above the BYUs, the Oklahomas, with that win and beating Oklahoma thoroughly at home. I think they're better than BYU. I think they're better than Cincinnati, the Kansas States, Texas, all those teams. I think Iowa State's still better than Baylor, even though Baylor beat them narrowly by 0.1 seconds from a Moshilovich 3. But
oh man, that was so close.
But I think the top 4 of the Big 12 solidified itself. It's Kansas, it's Houston, it's Iowa State, and then it's Baylor.
Yeah, I hear that. Let me run us around just a couple other results, give you a couple more to look out for on Wednesday night, and we'll get out of here. San Diego State handled Colorado State at home, 71-55. An interesting result there. Good for the Aztecs. Colorado State needs to keep working, keep piling up some wins. New Mexico wins at Nevada, 83-82. Jamal Mashburn Jr. gets the 3 with 20 seconds left to seal it. Unfortunately, Indiana State loses 80-67. I bring that up because it's the first time they've been ranked in a minute and unfortunately go out and lose right after that. I always hate to see that when mid-majors have that happen to them. Illinois destroys Michigan. Dayton makes work of Duquesne. Good job for both of those schools. Leaf, we've already mentioned UConn and Tennessee earlier. There are 2 other ranked teams in action tonight, Wednesday, and they are both playing each other. That's in the SEC, where number 11, South Carolina, is traveling to Auburn. Number 13, that's 8:30 Eastern on SEC Network. So back-to-back really important games for Auburn, hosting South Carolina tonight and then hosting Kentucky on Saturday, as we mentioned. 2 other games just to keep an eye on, more from a kind of bubbly or, lower seed standpoint. Miami is at Clemson, 7 Eastern on ESPN2, and Xavier travels to Seton Hall, 7 Eastern on CBS Sports Network. So we'll see what happens with all of those games, and Andy will be here to break all of that down with you on tomorrow's show. All right, folks, thanks so much for tuning in with us today. Always a fun conversation with Leaf. Hopefully you enjoyed going through all of Tuesday night's action and getting ready for another great night of college basketball. We want to thank you again for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch every single day. Reminder, if you haven't already, come sign up for the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. It's a great community. It's free, and we're just chatting college basketball all day long. If you haven't subscribed to the show, please do that on video and audio. If you're watching, smash the like button so we know you're here. If you haven't left us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, that would mean a lot. It helps spreads the name of the show and just get the word out there to more people. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Go Wildcats, and until tomorrow, peace.